So, you want to be an entrepreneur? Awesome. But you've probably got two massive questions buzzing around in your head, right? First, how do I even start this thing? And second, maybe the bigger one, where does the money come from? Well, let's get into it, because today we're going to map out the answers to both.
I love this quote. You got to remember, every single company you can think of, Google, Apple, even that awesome local coffee shop down the street, they all started out as just a tiny idea, struggling to get going, and every single one of them had to make a fundamental choice right at the beginning about how to get off the ground.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. Think of it like a choose-your-own-adventure for entrepreneurs. We'll start with your starting point, look at the different paths, and then we're going to tackle the big one, the money. All right, first things first, your entrepreneurial starting point. This is really about the three main paths you can take to launch a new venture. It's your first big decision. How are you going to enter the game? Let's break them down.
So, path number one, create a venture. I mean, this is the classic dream, isn't it? Building something from nothing, a totally blank canvas. It's definitely the most common route people take, but even within this path, you've got a couple of different ways to go.
And those two ways really boil down to this. Are you going for what's called a new approach? That's creating something totally unique, a product or service the world has literally never seen before, a true 0 to 1 moment. Or are you taking a new old approach? This is where you take an idea that already exists and you just make it better or faster, or you bring it to a whole new market. Both are completely valid ways to build a business, but they come with totally different sets of challenges.
Okay, so maybe building from scratch sounds a little daunting, and that's totally fine. That brings us to path number two, buying or franchising. Basically, acquiring a proven model. Here, you're stepping into something that's already got its engine running.
And there are some huge advantages to buying an existing business. Think about it. A successful future is way more likely because the business is already working. You get to skip all that painful startup grind, you have customers from day one, and hey, you might even get a bargain. It just cuts out a ton of the initial risk.
But, and this is a huge but, you have to ask one critical question. Why is the business being sold? This is everything. The owner might tell you, oh, I'm just retiring. And maybe they are, but you have to be a detective here. Are there skeletons in the closet? Is a huge competitor about to open up across the street? You have to dig deep, way past the official story.
Now, the other option here is franchising. This is kind of a hybrid model. You're the entrepreneur, the franchisee, but you're licensed to use a big company's brand, their playbook, their marketing, everything. You get the freedom of being your own boss, but with the safety net and power of an established brand behind you.
Okay, so you've picked a path, you know how you want to start. Now we hit the big one, the money question. How are you going to fund this idea? For most people, this is the biggest, scariest hurdle of all. So let's really unpack it.
When you boil it all down, there are really just two fundamental ways to get funding. The first is debt financing. You borrow money that you absolutely have to pay back. The second is equity financing. You sell a piece of your company, a piece of the ownership, in exchange for cash. This choice, it's a big one. It will define so much about your company's future.
So let's talk about funding with debt first. This is all about borrowing to build. The number one advantage here is pretty simple. You keep 100% ownership of your company. You're just taking on a loan. You're not giving up any control.
And where does this debt come from? Well, you've got your usual suspects, right? Commercial banks. But the world has opened up a lot. There's peer-to-peer lending. You can get trade credit, which is basically your suppliers letting you pay them later. And of course, there are dedicated finance companies. So you've got options.
All right, now let's flip the coin over and look at funding with equity. This is about trading ownership for capital. So you're not getting a loan you have to repay. Instead, you're selling a slice of the pie, a piece of your company, to someone who believes in your vision.
A really popular way to do this these days is through crowdfunding. You've probably seen it. An entrepreneur puts their idea out there on a platform, sets a funding goal, and then the crowd, just regular people, can pledge money to help make it happen. It's a powerful way to get both funding and validation.
Then you have the big leagues, venture capitalists, or VCs. When you hear about startups raising millions and millions of dollars, this is who they're talking about. These are professional investors who manage huge funds, and their entire job is to find and fund startups they think can grow massive. They're making a high-stakes bet that your company is going to be the next big thing.
Now, there are a lot of myths about VCs, so let's bust a few. Myth number one, they want to run your company. Nope, they're betting on you to run it. Myth two, they're quick to invest.
Absolutely not. It's a long, tough process. And that they're happy with a reasonable return? Not even close. We'll see why in a second.
And that brings us to maybe the most important truth about VCs. They don't just back good ideas, they back good management. The key word for them is execution. They'd rather have an A-plus team with a B-plus idea than the other way around any day of the week.
And to understand why they're so selective, just look at the kind of returns they need. For a brand new idea, they're looking for a 60% or higher annual return on their investment. That's insane, right? But it's because their business model is built on home runs. They know most of their investments will fail, so the one or two that succeed have to be massive wins that pay for all the losses.
But way before a company is ready for a VC, there's another crucial source of equity funding: business angels. You could think of them as informal risk capital. These are wealthy individuals, a lot of times successful entrepreneurs themselves, who invest their own money into promising new startups. And don't think for a second this is small potatoes. We're talking about over $25 billion a year. That's a huge amount of capital flowing into 60,000 to 70,000 different companies every single year. Angels are, without a doubt, a critical part of the startup ecosystem.
And what are they investing in? Well, a bit of everything. Software is the biggest piece of the pie, for sure. But look at this: healthcare, retail, biotech. It's all over the map. And a really important thing to remember is that angels often invest in industries they actually have experience in. So they bring more than just money to the table. They bring valuable expertise.
So we've covered a lot of ground. What's the big takeaway here? It's that there is no single right answer. The power is in knowing your options, understanding these different paths, knowing the difference between debt and equity, knowing who to go to for money. That knowledge is your single greatest asset on this journey.
So now you know the paths you can take. You know the funding options available to you. The only question left is, what are you going to do with it? Which combination of these tools is the one that's going to bring your big idea to life?